Everything changed in a matter of seconds. I mean, literally seconds. Picture a season of absolute, undeniable promise. A city completely electrified by an unexpected resurgence. All brought to a devastating, completely silent halt on the turf. Welcome to this cinematic explainer here on NFL Nexus. I am so thrilled you're here with us today because we are going to unpack the absolute most volatile, terrifying situation in the National Football League right now. Now, before we plunge into the high-stakes reality of the 2026 Colts offseason, do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and really consider supporting us by becoming a channel member. It means the world to us. All right, let's dive into this. We are looking at a franchise that is currently standing on an absolute precipice. General Manager Chris Ballard and head coach Shane Steichen, they are staring down a 2026 season where every single microscopic roster decision, every agonizing medical clearance, and every gritty depth chart battle carries the immense, suffocating weight of jobs, of legacies, and really the entire future of the organization. The margin for error here, it practically doesn't exist anymore. Let's look at the harsh, unfiltered reality of where the rest of the league thinks this team currently stands. 27. Just let that number hang in the air for a moment. 27. Out of the 32 teams in the National Football League, Justin Mello of NFL Draft on SI has placed the Indianapolis Colts at number 27 in his post-draft power rankings. Now, you gotta understand, this isn't just a low ranking, okay? This is a brutal, glaring indictment of the franchise's current stability. To give you some context on how bad 27 is, this places Indianapolis flirting with absolute rock bottom. They are being grouped in with franchises that are in the middle of massive, agonizing rebuilds and total identity crises. We're talking the Raiders, the Browns, the Jets, the Cardinals, the Dolphins. For a team that was sitting incredibly pretty at 8-2 just midway through the 2025 season, plummeting to the bottom 5 of the league's hierarchy is a staggering, almost unbelievable fall from grace. It instantly creates this suffocating sense of tension and dread around their pure survival in the 2026 campaign. The national media isn't just doubting the Colts right now. They are practically writing their obituary before training camp even opens its doors. So, the dark cloud hanging heavily over Lucas Oil Stadium begs one incredibly jarring question. Will the 2026 Colts completely collapse? We literally have to frame our entire explainer around this exact question today. Because when you strip it down and really look at the architecture of this team, you realize it is a roster built on a terrifyingly unstable foundation. We are talking about a historic franchise whose entire fate currently rests on a single fragile tendon. It's a roster that's been wildly patched together with unproven potential, aging veterans desperately looking for one last shot, and these intense cutthroat position battles that are totally flying under the national radar right now. It is, quite frankly, a house of cards. If the wind blows in the exact right direction, sure, they are legitimate contenders who could absolutely shock the AFC. But if one piece fails, if just one of these massive gambles doesn't pay off, the whole structure comes violently crashing down. To understand why the stakes are so unimaginably high today, we actually have to go back to the exact moment this timeline fractured. The ultimate undoing. Those are the chilling words being used to describe Week 14 of the 2025 regular season. I want you to really picture the scene. The Colts are an absolute juggernaut at this point. They're 8-2. The stadium is completely deafening. The narrative has completely shifted in their favor. Daniel Jones, a guy who was essentially cast off from the New York Giants, has found this incredible cinematic redemption in the Midwest. He is leading the charge and he's operating Shane Steichen's offense with just surgical precision. And then the snap, an Achilles tear. In the absolute blink of an eye, the entire upward trajectory of the franchise is paralyzed. What was an impressive, totally magical run was instantly transformed into a waking nightmare. You see, it wasn't just a season-ending injury for a quarterback. It was the ultimate undoing of a master plan. The air was literally sucked out of the building, and the Colts went from being these dangerous Super Bowl dark horses to a team just desperately trying to survive the rest of the calendar year. Because look at what they lost. Before that terrifying injury, we were witnessing sheer, undeniable efficiency from Daniel Jones. Through that 8-2 start, he had racked up 3,101 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, and an incredibly stellar 68% completion rate. He wasn't just managing the game, he was completely dictating it out there. He was undeniably rebounding from his really uninspired conclusion back in New York. But here is the agonizing gamble that Indianapolis is currently making right now. They are betting the entire 2026 season on a rehabbing quarterback returning to this exact level of elite production. The Colts are pushing all their chips to the center of the table on a player hoping you can not only return from one of the most notoriously difficult, career-altering injuries in all of sports, but also stay upright for 17 grueling, violent weeks, plus a potential playoff run. For a guy who's never played a full season in his 7-year career,
It is the literal definition of a high-risk gamble.
And the ticking clock of Jones's agonizing recovery is building this immense, inescapable pressure cooker. Starting with the absolute disaster in week 14 of 2025, you fast forward to late May of 2026, where we finally see Jones returning to teamwork, actually participating in his first 7-on-7 periods during OTAs. Now, while this is obviously a massively positive checkpoint for the team, it highlights the immense, suffocating pressure resting squarely on his shoulders. He is out there throwing in a knee brace, fighting through the massive physical and mental hurdles of the rehab process. Because looming right in the distance is September 2026, the Week 1 gamble. Can his body actually hold up to the violent reality of an NFL pass rush? Can he step up into the pocket, plant that surgically repaired foot, and drive the ball downfield without a single moment of hesitation? The clock is loudly, aggressively ticking, and the Colts' margin for error is shrinking by the second. But here's the craziest part. It's not just the quarterback position where the Colts are walking a tightrope. Section 1. The trenches. Battle for the edge. So let's shift over to the defensive side of the ball, because the Colts defense is in a wildly precarious situation right now. They need a massive spark to protect what is an incredibly inexperienced linebacker and safety room. When your back seven is young and literally learning on the fly against NFL offenses, your pass rush cannot just be good, it absolutely has to be elite. Now, they have a phenomenal, game-wrecking talent in Laiatu Latu on one side, but they desperately, fundamentally need a splash player opposite of him. And so, in one corner of this desperate fight for survival, we have Jalen Tumaloa, the 2025 second-round pick. And in the other corner, Arden Key, the gritty 8-year veteran. You have the entirely unproven sophomore carrying the incredibly heavy expectations of a high draft pedigree, going up against a seasoned journeyman who knows exactly what it takes to survive in the trenches of this league. This isn't just your standard, run-of-the-mill training camp roster battle. These two are locked in a high-stakes, violent collision course for the starting job on a defense that is begging for a savior. Because when you look at Tumaloa's 2025 rookie output, it was wildly underwhelming. Across 13 games, he managed just 17 tackles, one single tackle for loss, and only 6 quarterback hits. Guys, for a second-round edge rusher, that is practically being a ghost on the field. The Colts drafted this guy believing they were getting the absolute monster who terrorized the Big Ten. Remember, in his final year at Ohio State, Tumaloa was a total force of nature. He logged 12.5 sacks, 21.5 tackles for loss, forced fumbles, the whole shebang. But the transition to the pros, it has been a harsh, unforgiving reality check. He was far, far less impactful than the front office hoped, completely failing to carve out a meaningful role. Now, entering year 2, the pressure on him is astronomical. If he doesn't take a massive, immediate leap forward, the Colts' entire defensive strategy just crumbles. Now, on the flip side, we have 30.5. That is the number of career sacks Arden Key has accumulated over a grueling 116 games spread across 5 different NFL franchises. Key is the absolute definition of a seasoned journeyman. Throughout his career, he has primarily been a rotational edge rusher, right? Someone you bring in fresh on third down to just pin his ears back and hump the quarterback. But the Colts are looking at Key right now and asking a massive, potentially season-defining question. Can he replicate the unexpected massive breakout success they previously found with Samson Ebukam? Think about it. Ebukam was also a rotational guy who just exploded when he came to Indy. The Colts are praying, literally praying, that Key has that same latent potential just waiting to be unlocked with a full-time starting opportunity. Can this 8-year veteran defy the odds and become the definitive every-down menace opposite Latu? If Key actually wins this job, it's a huge testament to his survival skills. But man, it is also a glaring, flashing red siren of an indictment on their second-round draft pick. Section 2. The Void, an unlikely offensive weapon. Let's transition the drama right back over to the offense. Earlier this offseason, the Colts made a massive move. They traded their star wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., which created a gigantic, echoing void in the offense. Now, $114 million. That is the colossal, jaw-dropping weight of the 4-year extension awarded to Alec Pierce. After finally notching his first 1,000-yard receiving season in 2025 and doing it despite the absolute quarterback carousel of injuries, Pierce evolved. The front office rewarded him handsomely, cementing him as the undeniable WR1. But here is the massive, glaring problem. A deep threat exactly like Pierce fundamentally needs a possession receiver opposite of him to pull coverages and manipulate those safeties. With Pittman gone, Pierce is going to be facing double teams and bracket coverages every single Sunday, unless someone else on this roster steps up to strike actual fear into opposing defenses. And this sets the stage for what has become an intense, incredibly high-stakes fight for the WR2 position. Because when you look at it, it is a crowded, completely chaotic wide receiver room staring down this massive opportunity. First, you've got fourth-year pro Josh Downs. He's obviously a vital piece of the offense, but let's be real, he's mostly locked into that slot position. Then there's Nick Westbrook-Ikine, the 2026 free agent signee, brought in specifically for his big-bodied red zone veteran presence. You've got the rookie, seventh-round pick Deion Burks, who despite his much smaller 5'9" frame, is out there aggressively fighting for outside reps. And finally, you have the pure depth pieces, the longtime veteran Laquan Treadwell and third-year Mon Anthony Gold. It is this wild mix of slot guys, aging veterans, and late-round rookies, all violently clawing for the single, precious open spot in the starting lineup. The desperation in that building for anyone to emerge as a true, reliable number 2 is palpable. And then there is the name absolutely nobody had on their offseason bingo card, Ashton Dulin. Let's look at the facts. By definition, Dulin is a 6-year veteran with a very, very modest 623 career receiving yards and just 4 touchdowns over his entire career. Up until this exact moment, he has been primarily known and highly valued as a longtime special teams ace. We are talking about a guy who literally makes his money covering kicks and blocking on punts. But here is the massive script-flipping twist of OTAs. During Daniel Jones's highly anticipated return to 7-on-7 team drills, Ashton Dulin suddenly emerged from the pack. He somehow became Jones's absolute go-to target, quickly catching 2 touchdowns in the session and visibly, undeniably separating himself from the rest of that incredibly crowded receiver room. A special teams player, a guy who has been grinding in the shadows for 6 years, is suddenly seizing a massive offensive opportunity. He's looking like he actually has the inside track to the starting WR2 job. No way. Right? But listen to the sheer weights of this quote from head coach Shane Steichen right before mandatory minicamp. He stood at the podium and said, quote, "Ashton Dulin's made some good plays. Dulin had a great play today in the back of the end zone there. So those guys are stepping up, and I'm pleased with where that group's at right now." Guys, for an NFL head coach to publicly single out a special teams ace for his offensive playmaking in May is incredibly significant. It tells you 2 absolute realities. First, Dulin's crazy work ethic and this sudden, unexpected offensive chemistry with Daniel Jones are just impossible to ignore right now. But second, it highlights the absolute terrifying lack of an established alpha stepping up into Michael Pittman's shoes. Dulin is out there fighting for his football life, and he is capitalizing on a massive void. But let's be honest, the coaching staff knows that relying entirely on Dulin for 17 weeks might be a bridge entirely too far. Which perfectly leads us to this incredibly telling strategy from offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter. He noted recently, "We're going to try to use guys to the best of their ability to help our offense. We'll do everything we can to put them in the best position to have success." Now, what Cooter is essentially breaking down here in coach speak is a strategic committee approach. It is a high-stakes chess match by a coaching staff that knows they are operating without a definitive safety net. If Dulin can't carry the load full-time, they are going to have to rotate Westbrook-Ikine in the red zone, try Downs on the outside, and maybe try to force-feed the rookie Burks into space. It is an offense desperately trying to duct tape a WR2 together out of spare parts and situational strengths. And you know what that requires? It requires flawless play calling and absolutely perfect execution. If this committee approach fails, Alec Pierce is going to be swallowed up by double teams all year, and Daniel Jones will be forced into throwing into incredibly tight, dangerous windows, all while trying to protect a surgically repaired Achilles. Section 3. The scale. A season on the line. So we really need to zoom out for a second and look at the macro perspective here. We are looking at the razor-thin margin between a deep, glorious playoff run and a total, unforgiving franchise collapse. We have a quarterback rehabbing a torn Achilles on a aggressively ticking clock. We have completely unproven players fighting for their lives on the defensive edge, and we have a special teams player suddenly thrust into a massive void at wide receiver. Now, if this massive gamble pays off, if Daniel Jones's Achilles holds up to the violence of a 17-game season, if Arden Key or Jalen Tumaloa miraculously step up to terrify opposing quarterbacks, and if Ashton Dulin or this duct tape committee of receivers can properly support Alec Pierce, then, my friends, this Indianapolis Colts team is a legitimate, incredibly dangerous contender that could literally run the table in the AFC. But if just one of those fragile variables snaps, if Jones tweaks a knee compensating for the foot, if the pass rush goes completely quiet, or if the receivers just can't get open against man coverage, the dominoes will violently fall. They will hit rock bottom, totally validating that brutal number 27 power ranking and likely sparking a total regime change in Indianapolis. So I leave you with this lingering, incredibly provocative thought. Looking at the sheer fragility of Daniel Jones, the total desperation on the defensive edge, and the gaping void at wide receiver,
Is this a brilliantly calculated championship gamble by the Colts front office? Or are we simply watching the slow, painful prologue to an absolute, unmitigated disaster? The reality is terrifying, and the clock is loudly ticking toward week one. I want to know exactly where you stand on this. Sound off in the comments below right now. Are the Colts real contenders, or are they completely destined for a collapse? Don't forget to subscribe to NFL Nexus, leave a like on this explainer, and definitely consider becoming a channel member for more deep cinematic dives just like this one. Until next time, keep your eyes on the gridiron.